conversations around sustainability is not complete without addressing mobility. There is rapid urbanization on one hand, there is climate change on the other, and on top of it, we have the challenges imposed upon us by COVID-19. So how are different countries dealing with these challenges and making mobility more sustainable? What are the lessons that we can draw? Who better to ask than our next guest, Pradeep Parameswaran. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Pradeep Parameswaran, the man who heads the Asia Pacific region for the $60 billion ride-hailing startup Uber, the iconic company from America which has made waves across the world. Pradeep, welcome to Business Insider, and especially welcome to Global Trends Festival. I'm sure you have enjoyed yourself over the last couple of days, and I'm sure you will look forward to some of the sessions that are coming up. But we are absolutely delighted to have you here. What can I say more? Let's start with sustainability, because this is a topic that is very close to our heart. This is a topic that is at most important right now for the planet, for us as people. But I really want to start at basics, because some of these high-flying conversations that we have, it really flies over people's head. And I want your message to reach to as many people as possible. So some of the questions that people do ask us is, what is sustainable mobility? Is it no private cars? Or is it all private cars should be electric? Or is it that, individuals should take as much public transport as possible? Let's address this right at the root of it.
First of all, Sriram, can I say thank you for taking the opportunity to invite me here, because this is such an important topic. And I'm always afraid when things like COVID happen to us, some of the other conversations just take a backseat. And this is a topic that should not be taking a backseat. My short answer to your question is all of the above. This does mean fewer private vehicles. This does mean more people in fewer vehicles. And it does mean a lot of public transportation, and a combination of all of it needs to happen. Maybe I'll expound a little bit on that. Just think about this world, right? India as an example. We have very, very early days of private car ownership, 18 cars for every 1,000 people. The US has 800 cars for every 1,000 people. Our transport minister in India has spoken about this, right? Our roads have no space. I think you live in Bombay, you probably have a good appreciation. Can you imagine if the vehicles become as much as China, which is 120 for every 1,000, 6 times? There is no space. The answer cannot be more vehicles. Now, urbanization is unfortunately going to continue, which means more and more people are packing into our cities. That needs to get fixed. So the answer is probably a combination of lots of terrific high quality public transportation of affordable quality and price. Those have to be zero emission, which means that we have to move away from all of the polluting fuels into the world of electric. So combination of those two, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to explore those concepts more in today's conversation.
Absolutely. And congratulations on your recent elevation in the middle of a pandemic into this APAC role. I don't know, are you excited about it? Are you scared? We will definitely like to hear more on that. But of course, along with it, why don't you share with us some anecdotes about how some countries have dealt with these challenges? How have they sort of, reduced the love for new cars and increased the love for public transport, and of course, all of those things that come with these challenges?
Sriram, I think the best example I have is actually the example that gives me most hope, which is millennials. If you actually look at millennial trends and kids that are now in school and growing up, right? So 2 generations, they aren't buying stuff as much anymore. And this is not just cars. They're not a generation that believes in this idea of ownership. They actually want to use shared resources. And for them, shared resources also means shared mobility. In fact, a lot of the data around car buying from first-time buyers who are in the millennials in many parts of the world is actually telling us that they are voting very much with their wallet by choosing to actually take more public transportation, more bikes. You see the number of people biking that is increasing dramatically, and electric mobility options, companies like Lime, companies like Bird, our own Yulu in India, they're all coming up with 2-wheeler form factors that are electric. I think this is a terrific trend that we are starting to see in the market today. And I think they hold a lot of promise as these generations come into the workforce, that they will actually move away from private vehicle ownership.
on the question of shared mobility, because that is something that still makes me uncomfortable, because especially in the post-pandemic, during the pandemic and right after it, do you think shared mobility, an Uber pool, those kind of concepts are going to lose appeal?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. In fact, Sriram, this is the question I'd say in the pandemic times I have grappled with the most. And as a company, we have spent entire teams, resources, multiple millions of dollars to actually solve in the right way. So let me first start by saying safety is absolutely now the number one factor that people think about as they start to get back on the road and start to return to quote unquote normalcy, right? Whatever that means in this world. What we are starting to see is that they want to be shown, not told, which is when they come to a vehicle, they want to see that the vehicle is disinfected. They want to see that there are safety screens in the vehicle, so there's separation for the driver's safety and for the rider's safety. They want to be seeing others using masks. There are a number of measures that are critical to take, and this is what we have been doing. Given that we have this being the APAC edition, I will use the example from India as one example, which is 100,000 vehicles, autos and cars. Just in the last 3 months, we have put safety screens in. And you will see that as a way for us to say that you need real physical separation in a car. We have instituted technology that says if you don't have a mask, you can't ride. And that's true for a driver. And we are deploying selfie technologies to be able to check that. We are equally insisting that riders can't get on without a mask because you have to be responsible to keep the car safe for the next rider. And then lastly, if you looked at a marketing campaign that we launched for education, this is not really about saying get out on the road. In fact, we are telling people don't get out if you don't really need to. But if you need to, our safety campaign was around this whole idea of safer for each other. So I think this is a collective responsibility, but we have a big role to play, and we are investing a large amount of technical and physical resources on the ground to keep ride sharing safe. Now, you asked the interesting question around the Uber pool. I think Uber pool is going to be something.
I wouldn't have let you go without that.
Oh, of course, of course. Uber pool is suspended as we speak because based on the expert advice that we have received from epidemiologists around the world, this is not the time to launch that service. At some point, when we are at the back end of the pandemic, when we feel like it is safer to do so, it is the right answer for sustainable mobility over a period of time, but now is not the time.
So, how long is it suspended for? Do you have any timelines in mind?
We are moving along with expert advice as the disease progresses and we see how humanity is able to deal with this. There is absolutely no date, and frankly, there is no pressure or compulsion commercially for us to be able to do this now. So it is wait and watch for us.
Interesting, because I obviously that leads me to the question on obviously commuting has gone down and there has been some recovery, I'm told. Could you share with us a little more on what kind of recovery you're seeing, and is there any lesson in this recovery and a sign for the future?
I think it's a tale of 10,000 cities. So the answer depends on where you live. So even if I look at just the APAC footprint, we have countries like Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, that are nearly at pre-COVID levels, which is shocking to us that the societies have come back and come back so strongly. If you look at Australia, Melbourne is been under lockdown, and so obviously business is slow as the city is very much dealing with kind of a case breakout. But there are a number of cities in Australia that are north of 70-75% recovered. And then we talk about India, which is amongst our slower markets to recover. Frankly, as the caseload continues to increase, it is very evident to us that people are taking a much more of a cautious outlook towards actual transportation. So India is probably going to be slightly slower on the recovery curve.
We also have the big question of the impact on employment and workforce that we have to address. We have to protect the people of first and then go for convenience. I think that is an argument that would come up if once this debate catches steam. So Uber in London is going to be all electric by 2025. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have similar goals for Uber in India as well?
So I think our announcement that we made in September is actually one of the most exciting things. I have a small digression with a personal story that I want to tell you. I have a son and a daughter, but my son is 11, born and raised in Delhi, and he has been hospitalized 6 times because of bad air between his ages 1 to 3. And so we are living examples of the damage bad air does to us. In fact, one of the interesting factoids that I picked up recently was global emissions were down 17% in April. And by the way, it was only 7% down in June, right? Tells you how quickly it comes back as human beings come back to normal activity. So
And
this is actually personally
Pradeep, we are
quite.
entering winter in NCR, where you are right now, and that 7%, and we see every year what happens then. Honestly, there needs to
Absolutely.
be an answer.
There needs to be an answer. There needs to be an answer, frankly, now. Now, so if you look at what announcement we have made globally, first, we are committed to making ride sharing 100% electric in London in 2025, 100% emission free by 2030 in US, in Canada, and in Europe, and 2040 for all of our fleets all around the world. Now, that is a function of where different countries are in their readiness for the electric ecosystem. And I'd say that markets and countries in our part of the world are still kind of catching up and getting our act together. Obviously, if you look at markets like Japan and Korea, the problem there is slightly different in that they have very, very advanced and well developed public transportation systems. And so I think they think about the problem differently versus Australia, which is 80% private car ownership, which means that those really need to change fast. And I think we are ready to kind of push along with the Australian government to make it better. And in India, where I'd say that our government has been very much at the forefront of aggressively pushing, but as an industry, we are not yet there. So I think this is a slightly different problem. So the issues are very different by market, but our commitment is to get to 100% emission free by 2040.
I'm completely timed out, but I'm too tempted to ask one final question, because this is something that's been bothering me for a while now. Because we have seen in spurts, companies like Uber finding a partner in a car maker, and right now it seems like an ideal time because they also need demand, you also need supply, and is this the right time for you to go for such partnerships? Is there something in the offing?
Actually, there's 100% right that this is the right time to do it. So if you look at some of our global announcements that we have made, for example, with a company like Nissan, this is very much in the same vein. In fact, the question on India is quite timely. One of the companies that is doing cutting edge work in India is a startup. It's a lithium ion, and they have a number of commercially viable cars that are out in the marketplace. We've just announced the intent to put 1,000 of their vehicles on our platform in India here in the next few months. That's one example. The other one is Sun Mobility, which is three-wheelers and electric three-wheelers, and we have a partnership with them to be able to trial. They have already introduced some of their vehicles in Chandigarh, and now we are about to introduce that in NCR. And so there are two really good examples. We have the Mahindra.
Are you not interested in some of the bigger OEMs, the big car
I was
makers?
about to come there. In fact, I was going to
Okay.
talk about Mahindra, and Mahindra has got a number of cars such as the E2, for example, that's already on our platform and has been flying for the last year plus. The one thing I'll say, Sriram, is that our intent is to partner with anybody who is going to be able to put a technically sound, safe, and commercially viable vehicle on our platform and use our platform and encourage people to take electric vehicles. Because I'll tell you, customers are ready, riders are ready. I think the manufacturers and the collective manufacturing ecosystem needs to come together to be able to accelerate this here in the coming years. I'm very positive that in the two and three wheeler space, this is going to happen very fast in India. I think the car space probably will take some more time.
Fantastic, Pradeep. I mean, that's all the time we have. I wish I had some more time to probe you a little more about your plans going forward. Uber is one of the companies that excites the audience of Business Insider time and again. But we will continue to do that beyond the Trends Festival. This is now time for me to say goodbye to Pradeep.